Hello everyone, and welcome back to Thinkology. My name is Vamp, and I'm your narrator for today. I think it goes without saying, but today's episode is going to get incredibly graphic and brutal at parts, so if you don't feel like you're in the right headspace to watch that, I more than understand. For those of you that are still here, let's get right into it and talk about what makes Pedro Lopez one of the worst serial killers in history. 1948, in Tolima, Colombia, a time when the country was in political turmoil and crime was rampant. He was the seventh of 13 children born to a Colombian prostitute. His mother was named Belinda Lopez de Constienda, and his father, Medardo Reyes, who was apparently married to another woman at the time and having an affair with Belinda, was shot and killed 6 months before Lopez was born. This was after a religious mob attacked the grocery store Reyes had been in, a part of the first attacks of La Valencia. La Valencia was a horrible time for Colombia. The violence between 1946 and 1964 resulted in over 200,000 deaths at least, and an estimated 1 million people were displaced from their rural homes. The Civil War originated from conflict between liberals and conservatives in the country, and when the leader of the Liberal Party was assassinated in broad daylight in 1948, things boiled over. This is to simply say, while nothing justified Lopez's actions, seeing the horrific, violent environment he grew up in may help explain a few things. It's been said that Pedro Lopez was seen as a polite and innocent boy at first, who even dreamed of becoming a teacher someday. However, Pedro was deeply affected by his mother's work, seeing her with clients, abusive clients at that, and it's said that at the age of 8, Pedro molested his young sister. He was caught by his mother and kicked out of the family home, leaving him to fend for himself. Some sources online also say that his mother was an overbearing woman or even physically abusive. Other reports say Lopez didn't molest his sister, but he ran away. I don't want to speak ill of Belinda because I can't say for certain what the truth is. In interviews, she stated that even though they were poor, she was a loving mother, while Pedro says she punished him with violence. Belinda also says that Pedro ran away, and at the time, she thought he might have been kidnapped and tried to find him. I'm more inclined to believe his mother, but again, I can't say for sure. Regardless, Pedro had it incredibly rough as a young boy on these violent streets. One source states, Lopez traveled to Bogota, the capital city of Colombia, where he became one of the homeless children known as gamines. He eventually joined a gang and smoked bazuco, an impure form of cocaine. While on the streets, a stranger approached Lopez and offered him a bed, but instead took the youngster to an abandoned building and sexually assaulted him. Generally, sources seem to agree on this point. Even if the wording is slightly different, a different source says he was taken in by a man who turned out to be a pedophile and was abused for quite a while, which may imply he was kept there for some time instead of being a one-time occurrence. Either way, this would be disgusting and despicable, and I feel so badly for young Pedro here. Although not much is said of Pedro's life on the streets in these years, sources say that Pedro was begging for money, looking through garbage bins and food to survive, and he wandered the streets for at least a year. He had to learn how to survive, fighting with knives for places to sleep, along with other gamine gangs. Eventually, as one article reads, an American couple took pity on the young Lopez and offered him their home as a place to sleep. He took the offer and was enrolled in a school for orphans. Unfortunately, he was once again sexually assaulted by one of the teachers, causing him to steal from the school's coffers, run away, and promise to never let himself be victimized again. He turned to a life of crime where he discovered he had a talent for car theft and earned good money selling the vehicles to chop shops. At the age of 18, though, he was caught and sentenced to 7 years of prison. Quickly, though, Lopez found himself a victim of gang rape while incarcerated. Lopez then fashioned a shiv from a utensil and killed the 4 men involved in the incident. As it was considered self-defense, only 1 year was added to his term. A different source claims he was gang raped at the age of 21 and 2 years were added to his sentence, not 1. Another source claims he was expelled from the school and doesn't mention his abusive teacher. Again, accounts do differ here, but most say that yes, he was abused by a teacher, then gang raped in prison. While this doesn't excuse the monster he became, I can at least understand why Pedro became the way he did. Anyway, now we know Pedro's background, let's start to take a look at what he did in his early adult years and when the murders began. In 1978, Lopez was released from prison, moved to Peru, and began kidnapping and killing young Peruvian girls. He was caught by a group of indigenous people and tortured and buried up to his neck in the sand, but was later freed and deported to Ecuador. Experiencing near death did not influence his murderous ways, and his killing of young girls continued. The increase of missing girls was noticed by authorities, but it was concluded that they had likely been kidnapped by child peddlers and enslaved for sexual violence. Yet again, sources don't quite agree here, even if the general facts remain the same. Pedro was raping and killing young girls, some say aged only 8 to 12 years old. However, some sources state that when Pedro was caught by a Peruvian tribe, an American Christian missionary who was living and ministering to the tribe pleaded with the tribe leaders to spare Lopez's life. The missionary stressed that the natives should turn over Lopez to the Peruvian police authorities and follow the country's laws rather than taking a vigilante justice approach. They relented. Lopez left the tribe with the missionary, who handed him over to the state police. Once the missionary departed, the police let Lopez go free. Pedro did relocate to Ecuador, but he spent some time in Colombia first, where he continued hurting innocent young girls. In a later interview, Lopez described the scene as follows. Indians Peru had me tied up and buried in the sand to my neck when they found out what I'd been doing to their daughters. They had placed syrup on me and were going to let me be eaten by ants. But an American missionary lady came by in her Jeep and promised them she would turn me over to the police. They left me tied up in the back of her Jeep and she drove away. But she released me at the border of Colombia and let me go. I didn't hurt her because she was too old to attract me. Now, I understand why the missionary didn't want to see Lopez killed, truly. But unfortunately, law enforcement all over the Americas are known for ignoring indigenous people's concerns. I know it happens in the US, so I'm sadly not surprised that it happens in South America too. The group of Ayacuchos wanted to take justice into their own hands because, well, the justice system doesn't work for them. And I can't blame them for wanting that, whether or not you think it's right. Sadly, because of this, Pedro is able to continue his killing. After all, no one stopped him so far, so why should he stop now? Authorities at the time seemed convinced these children were being kidnapped and sold as sex slaves or even organ sources, so not only was Pedro essentially free to keep up his crimes, but police weren't even looking for a killer at all. Though it worries me that authorities seem to dismiss the idea of children being sold as sex slaves too. Point is, they didn't have any idea of what was going on. Pedro was terrorizing Ecuador frequently in the late 1970s, and he is quoted as later saying that he preferred Ecuadorian girls the most because, quote, they're more gentle and trusting, more innocent, end quote. He also reportedly wanted to kidnap and kill an English or Scottish child and one of their beautiful blonde daughters, as he said, but their parents were more watchful, as a tourist should be when traveling in a foreign land with a child, really. One source read, he even set his sights on a young girl who might have even been Scottish when her tourist family stumbled upon his ghoulish path. He recalled, I walked among the markets searching for a girl with a certain look on her face of innocence and beauty. She would be a good girl, always working with her mother. I followed them, sometimes for 2 or 3 days, waiting for the moment she was left alone. Once, I even spent 2 days following a tourist family. I was told they came from England or Scotland. I really wanted to take their beautiful blonde daughter, but I never got the chance. Instead, Pedro continued kidnapping and killing young girls that were local to Ecuador. You'd think that with the sick, twisted individual on the loose, people may be scared, but according to authorities, they had no reason to be. One A&E biography documentary that I was able to find on YouTube says that at the time, the police released a statement that the girls had gone missing because they were runaways who failed their classes. Parents, on the other hand, didn't buy this. Families tried to find the girls on their own. One mother put ads in the newspaper about her missing daughter, but it wasn't until a flash flood revealed that these girls were being murdered, and people began to suspect a killer was in the area. According to one source, a flash flood in the city of Ambato, Ecuador, unearthed the body of 4 young girls. The sickening discovery put the city on alert. Some sources say this was in 1979, others say April of 1980. Either way, it's truly the best that this flood happened and the people became aware, because just a few days later, Pedro tried to kidnap a young girl again. This time, however, it didn't go as planned. It was Sunday, March 9th of 1980. Pedro was posing as a peddler selling some padlocks and various wares at market. He approached one vendor, Carlina, and her young daughter, Maria. It was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Carlina said. This man asked me to sell him food. I began looking into my pots to see what I had. Then he kept looking at my daughter to get her attention. Thankfully, the smart little 11-year-old girl went to her mother's side and told her the man was looking at her ugly and kept calling her to come to him. Carlina spotted him leaving the plaza and was suspicious, so she asked other people at the market to catch him. They jumped him and dragged him back to the market, accusing him of trying to kidnap her daughter. Pedro said that he was just a poor man with a clean heart, but they weren't buying it. Police, finally, weren't buying it either. It said he initially refused to cooperate with authorities until investigator Pastor Cordova Godino went undercover as a fellow inmate. Gaining Lopez's trust, Godino was able to get a confession from Lopez as well as details about sites where the victims were buried. Police ultimately unearthed 57 bodies. Some reports give the number as 53. In an interview, Godino states, "For 27 days I hardly slept, afraid to be strangled in my bed. I kept a towel wrapped around my throat, but I tricked Lopez into confessing by pretending I was a rapist too. He boasted to me of murder after murder in Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru. It was beyond my wildest nightmares. He told me everything." Although Pedro led the police to over 50 bodies, he confessed to over 300. Pedro said he killed at least 110 children in Ecuador, more than 100 in Colombia, and another 100 in Peru, according to another source. Lopez admitted that he would walk the streets looking for innocent girls who he would lure away with the promise of gifts. Lopez often brought the girls to prepared graves, sometimes filled with the dead bodies of other girls he had killed. He would calm the child with soft, reassuring words throughout the night. At sunrise, he would rape and strangle them, satisfying his sick sexual needs as he watched their eyes fade away as they died. In Lopez's confession, he told of having tea parties and playing morbid games with the deceased children. He would prop them up in their graves and talk to them, convincing himself that his little friends liked the company. But when the dead children failed to answer, he would become bored and go off to find another victim. As more and more about this became known, the public gave him the name the Monster of the Andes. I don't think I have anything to say about what I just read. I'm pretty speechless, honestly. In another interview with Lopez, one source states, Lopez lulled them with cuddles before raping them at sunrise. He explained, "When the sun rose, I would strangle her. It was only good if I could see her eyes. I never killed anyone at night. It would have been wasted in the dark. I had to watch them by daylight." He said it took the girls 5 to 15 minutes to die. "I was very considerate. I would spend a long time with them to make sure they were dead. I would use a mirror to check if they were still breathing." Yet, despite the public obviously loathing him, Lopez seemed to revel in the attention. He quoted as telling an interviewer around that time, "When one dies, one totally loses his emotion, his vision, his ability to see, a death that you can forget who you are. Everything you did is now in darkness." End quote. He even asked a reporter if this would be history, and will it be important? "I'm too young to die, man." Lopez said the grave sites were all over the country, and he led the police to each one. An editor for La Verdad said, "Something that struck me was how cold he was when visiting the grave sites. It was as if what he'd done was normal." Lopez led police across 11 Ecuadorian provinces, proving that he was, in fact, a prolific serial killer. Strangely, Carlina told A&E that Ecuadorian authorities actually dressed Lopez up as a police officer when he led them to the grave sites. No one even recognized him or knew at the time that it was the killer leading police to the grave sites. In the documentary, it's not said why this was done, but I guess it was maybe so Lopez wasn't mobbed with reporters or questions. I'm genuinely not sure. Amparo Garces Lozada and her family identified her sister's clothes when her sister was found under a bridge on the outskirts of Amparo. The father said that it was horrible for him to see what Lopez had done, to identify his daughter solely based on her clothes, and he wanted to hurt Lopez. However, the man had a police officer on either side of him, so he could do nothing. As an aside, I don't think Lopez should have been there when the family was there. That must be adding to the family's pain so much more than necessary. Once the body was found, they should have led him away or something so they wouldn't have to be subject to that. Another one of Lopez's targets, Ivanova Jacome, the daughter of a successful baker. It was February 14th, 1988 when Ivanova went missing, and the police responded quickly because Carlos Jacome was a well-respected businessman. Frustratingly, as the documentary explains, only the wealthy really had access to the police, and it was only when Ivanova vanished that police were like, Gee, we should take this seriously. Finally, news of the other missing girls began to spread, and Ivanova's body was recovered in a little shack outside of town. She was buried the same day that Pedro attempted to kidnap Carlina's daughter. Yet Pedro, like many serial killers, had absolutely no shame. The documentary states, South Sado, Ecuador, Lopez showed off his brutal handiwork. He grabbed a skull and placed it under his arm so the press could take a picture of him. Cordova took it away from him. What he wanted to have was a trophy, and he was proudly showing what he had done. This is beyond infuriating to me. I understand the police needed Lopez to lead them to the bodies, but if he was dressed up like an officer, taking this tour and able to touch the bodies, that is so disrespectful and must have been so upsetting to the families. In my opinion, he should have been in handcuffs, basically just told, okay, nod or point to wherever it is, then brought away. Seeing and touching the remains, being that close to them, shouldn't have ever happened. As time went on during this tour, it's also said that Pedro started to see Cordova as a father figure to him, and he told the man about his past, and this is how we learned some of what happened in the first portion of the video, at least from his account. On July 31st, 1981, 33-year-old Pedro pled guilty to the murders of 57 girls. In an interview from prison, it's said that Lopez spoke about the girls as if he cared for them, as if he was saving them from a life of misery. He called them my dolls, and spoke like he had a mission to rescue them. On other occasions, Lopez claimed his alternate personality committed the crimes. Psychologists evaluated him and determined he was a sociopath, and Lopez said that he never felt any pain for his victims. However, in Ecuador, at least at the time, it didn't matter whether you killed one person or 1,000. The prison sentence was the same. The law didn't allow for consecutive sentences, and the maximum was only 16 years. Hell, the maximum sentence for drug trafficking is higher. This has long since been a problem in Ecuador. Extremely low sentences aren't anything new. The maximum sentence now seems to be 25 years, which I guess you could argue that's an improvement, but for people like Pedro, they deserve life at least. He only got about 4 months for each victim this way. Only 4 months for murdering each little girl. It's said that he served his time patiently, and on August 31st, 1994, at 45 years old, Pedro was released from prison after serving 14 years of a 16-year sentence. He was released 2 years early for good behavior. So I guess all that horrific murders and rapes of little girls don't matter as long as he was a good prisoner and didn't start any fights. There's no fucking justice here. Parents were devastated, many wanted to take the law into their own hands. And I don't condone violence here, but I really can't blame them. Thankfully, just 1 hour after he was released, he was detained to be deported to Colombia and face justice there. I guess when one country can't hold him long enough, they said, well, okay, you find a way to keep him now. Colombia's National Security Department knew better than to let him roam around free, so he was processed and handed over to the prosecutors. He was charged with 12-year-old Flora Sanchez's murder back in 1979. Once again, in this case, Flora's mother, Alba, identified her daughter because of her clothes. However, yet again, the justice system failed. In 1995, he was found insane and condemned to a psychiatric wing, and then, just 3 years later, he was declared sane and recovered and released in 1998. Frankly, even if Lopez had recovered, he should have stayed in the ward. You don't get to murder over 50 young girls, possibly hundreds, and say, oh, it's fine because I feel better now, and walk free. Only $50 bail freed him, and the condition of his bail was pitiful. He had to keep receiving treatment and, once a month, report to a judge. It's said that upon his release, Lopez went to visit his mother. Belinda claims that her son said, "Mother, kneel down in front of me so I may bless you." But she said, "The one who should kneel is you." And then said, "Mother, I came to see what you would give me in my inheritance." Belinda told him that all she had was a bed and a chair, and so he took those two things, put them on the porch to sell, pocketed the money, and disappeared. One book even claims that there was a $25,000 reward raised payable to anyone that would kill Lopez when people learned he was being released. Another source states, quizzed about the killer's release sometime in 1998 or 1999, prisons minister Pablo Figueroa admitted, yes, it does sound strange, but that is our law. The law of no executions or sentences longer than 20 years was passed over 100 years ago to protect presidents of Ecuador from being killed following revolutions and military coups. In the past, they have been executed in horrific ways, like being pulled apart by 4 horses. The law seemed humane. Victor Lozano, governor of Ambato jail, where Lopez was first held before transferred to Quinto, is terrified he will strike again. Said Lanzano, God save the children. He is unreformed and totally remorseless. This whole nightmare may start again. He won't live long, predicted the tough mother of Maria Poveda, the young Ecuadorian girl who helped in his capture, the one he tried to kidnap. It will be a kindness to the world for someone to murder this fiend. The monster of the Andes won't last long on the outside. Maybe that is why we haven't heard of more missing girls. Perhaps someone, even the police in Colombia or Ecuador, have already killed him. If they have, I hope they made him suffer. For a while, it doesn't seem like anyone knew what happened to Pedro Lopez. In 2002, Interpol released an advisory on behalf of Colombian authorities stating that they were looking for Lopez because they suspected he committed another murder. In 2006, Guinness World Records even credited him as the most prolific serial killer, but that was later removed when people complained it made a competition out of murder. It's an unsatisfying end, but we don't know where Lopez is to this day or if he's even alive. With that said though, that's where I'm going to end today's video. Please subscribe if you're new here, and if you want to hear more of me and my voice, you can check out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/vampcandy, linked in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to stay hydrated, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!